Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Complicated Creation. This will be Part 3, Chapter 2, entitled To Tell the Truth. Izuku takes stock. They're in Tokyo. He's in the Hisamatsu police station in an interrogation room. He isn't handcuffed or restrained. A plus. But he's in a room with Sir Nighteye, a detective who introduced himself as Tsukauchi, and Eraserhead. They're all on the side of the table closest to the door across from him, and Izuku is feeling more than a little trapped. At least, Tamomo no Mei is keeping Sir Nightae's spirit back. He's huge, a tortoise with a beak that looks like he could take off one of Izuku's limbs if he wanted to, and he absolutely looks like he wants to. The cat that drapes itself over the detective's shoulder is almost comforting in how normal she is in comparison. "We're going to ask you some questions," Sir Nighteye says, elegant fingers shifting from their folded position in front of him to push up his glasses, eyes staring down at Izuku. It's obvious he already doesn't like him. Izuku can tell from experience, and the ire rolling off of his spirit isn't helping the oppressive mood of the room or the uncomfortable tightness in his chest. The worst part is they'd drag Sir Nighteye and this detective out of bed for something that wasn't going to be any use to them, and whatever case they're working on, and they're going to blame him for it. "I'm going to disappoint you." Izuku's apologetic, at least a little, because they all have more important work they could be doing. "I really don't know anything about what you're investigating." "How do you know what we're investigating?" Nighteye is so sharp, and Izuku had always admired him as All Might's sidekick, but up close, and in person he's somehow even more intimidating than All Might ever was. Maybe because when he thinks of All Might he remembers a smile, and Nighteye has none. And he's not thinking straight, Izuku realizes, feeling his chest go even tighter. He has to be smart about this. He can't get caught up in the fact he's around heroes, that once upon a time he would have given anything to stand in their presence. He has to think, or this is going to be so very, very bad. "Eraserhead said you're trying to research the people making the weapons stealing quirks." It's true, and believable, while his powers are anything but. "It makes sense that you would, and I get why you'd think I'd be involved, but I'm really not. I just know how to fix what they did." They look at Tsukauchi. It's subtle, but Izuku catches it, the way they glance at him sidelong. The detective hasn't said anything yet, and the cat on his shoulders is watching Izuku with eyes that are entirely black, and the room is silent for a moment before Nighteye continues. "And how did you know what heroes had been affected to help them?" Izuku takes a breath. This is where he has to be careful. This is where he has to lie. "It's my quirk." Tsukauchi shifts as the cat on his shoulder yowls. Everyone looks at the detective and waits as he sets his pen down on the notepad. "Deku," he says, voice serious, "I'm afraid we haven't been entirely honest with you in our introductions. I'm going to correct that now, because I'd like you to be honest with us. You can trust us. Do you understand that?" Trust them, when he's trapped in this room, back to a wall behind how many more walls, where they're not going to let him go and they had lied to get him here? Is that the lie he's talking about, or something else? Izuku's so used to adults lying and calling him a liar that the idea of trusting anyone is absurd, but whatever this is about, the detective is waiting for an answer. Does he trust them? Not really, but they won't want to hear that. "Yes?" The cat growls, and Tsukauchi frowns slightly, and no one says anything as the man looks at Izuku with concern that it might actually be a little genuine, but is still dangerous. "Deku," he says again, pausing every time he says Izuku's name like he doesn't like to use it. "My quirk allows me to know when someone is lying. Do you understand what that means?" Holy shit! Izuku forgets how to breathe for a moment as he stares at the detective, and then everyone blinks and leans back as Izuku sits up and leans forward. He doesn't care, doesn't really even register it or the way the cat spirit hisses at him because the detective can tell when he speaks the truth. "How does that work?" he asks, mind already thinking about applications and maybe, finally, help. "Does it understand partial truths? Can you tell if specific statements are true or false, in their parts, or only as a whole? How does it deal with empirical truths compared to narrative truths, or does it only deal in absolutes? What about truth statements the speaker doesn't believe?" The three men all stare at him, and there's silence for a second before the cat is laughing at him, laughing so hard she falls off of Tsukauchi's shoulder and lands on the table. No one sees her walk up to Izuku to sit in front of him, bushy tail swaying back and forth for a moment before jumping to land on Izuku's head, claws out. She yowls again, as Izuku ducks, flinching as his personal ward sends her flying. Eraserhead tenses, and Izuku realizes he probably looks like he's just tried to slam his own head into the table. "Sorry," he says, flushing and trying to deflect. "Quirks are just... they've always interested me. And I have wards to protect me from spirits like you," he tells the cat. "Leave me alone." Her reply is another hiss that is wordless, but the meaning is inescapably rude. He ignores her to focus on the humans who look at him worriedly. "It's all right," Tsukauchi says, a bit gentler now, concern lining his face. "The specifics of my quirk aren't something we usually discuss because it's important to my work, but those are very good questions. I'd be happy to answer what I can with you when we're done here." Right. Can't tell the kid how it works so he can lie around it." Izuku shrugs because he can't blame them. The detective can identify the truth, and that's what's important, even if he doesn't quite know the details yet. Out of anyone, if Izuku has any chance at all, this has to be it, right? A detective who can understand the truth, and two heroes, one of them who'd worked for All Might, and one who talks to vigilantes and street thugs and understands how the world works in the grimy, less pleasant, less easy bits. If anyone might. Izuku makes himself look up, look them all in the eye, look the detective straight on, and fights against too much hope because if this backfires, he's going to really, really regret it. "I don't have a quirk. That part's easy. I was born without one. I have the toe joint and everything, and instead of just being a quirkless nobody with no future, the universe, for some reason, gave me the ability to see the things that give people quirks." He looks to Eraserhead. "Yours is a 9-tailed fox spirit. She's the one that told me you'd let yourself get shot and that it was a trap. That's why I knew you'd done it, and why you'd done it, and where you were, and how I got Sir Nightaye's number. His hero agency information is on the front of the folders you were reading." There is a very, very long pause. Izuku's pretty sure he could hear a pin drop. He can absolutely hear the racing of his heart in his ears. The spirits in the room are laser-focused on him. "Bold," says the cat, finally actually speaking to him directly as she climbs the detective's back to settle on his shoulders once more. "It won't work." "Spirits." Nighteye finally breaks the silence, and he doesn't make it into a question, but a statement. Izuku's used to the disbelief, is all too familiar with it, and with the cold stare that accompanies it, but it never stops hurting. "Yours is a tortoise," he presses on, feeling more desperate. "Tsukauchi's is a cat, a long-haired orange one. Everyone with a quirk has one." There's another silence. This time the detective breaks it. "I see." His voice is carefully modulated, carefully easy, like Izuku's a wild animal or a violent drunk. "And you're the only one who can see them, Deku. Do they speak to you? Do they tell you to do things?" Izuku's heart sinks to his feet, and then through the floor, and ice fills the hollow in his chest. They don't believe him. Even knowing he's telling the truth, even the detective doesn't believe him. No one ever believes him. Except his mother, and she's gone, and this happens every time, and he's so very tired of trying and failing and paying for that failure. He pinches the bridge of his nose to prevent tears. He needs to do damage control. Maybe he could clear the ward he's wearing and ask the cat to attack him again, but knowing her, she'd ignore him. And asking the tortoise would probably actually result in losing a limb, which might prove something, but would probably just prove how damn desperate he feels. It's fine. He's dealt with this his whole life. What's 3 more people, heroes, who think he's crazy? Better than the alternative. Better than slipping and hurting someone. "Look," he begins again, feeling like it's a lost cause but trapped now. "It's the truth, but you don't have to believe it. It doesn't change." Will they believe him if he can prove something? Is it worth pressing on? He has Eraserhead's quirk to fix, after all. "I mean, quirk suppressants don't work on me. You can check my foot and, well, I don't know what your quirk would do," he tells Eraserhead, "but I doubt it'll do anything. I'm happy to try once we fix it." "Let's talk about how you fix it." Eraserhead seems eager to move on, but Izuku can't tell if it's because he's uncomfortable, annoyed, or just tired. "You wanted me to sit on the bench. Why?" "It's not going to make a lot of sense," Izuku warns, because usually he'd lie, but if he can't, they're really not going to get it when they won't believe the basics. Can I borrow your pen and some paper?" he asked the detective. "You took my backpack." Which he'd planned for, thankfully, and they won't find anything useful in it, but he's out of tools unless he cuts himself. When he has the pen and a scrap of paper from the detective's notebook, it's easy to write a sigil. You can see that, but none of you could copy it if you tried, right? They all examined it like it's a bomb, which would be hilarious if he wasn't, in police custody. Nighteye even takes out his phone to take a photo and frowns at the result. Honestly, the easiest answer you're not going to like is magic. Sorry, but it's magic. It doesn't exactly work with technology, and you have to have a certain something to read it or write it. Don't ask me what the certain something is, because I haven't met anyone human who can, but I have found old books and things written in it, so people must have been able to years ago, probably back when it was easier to believe in. Anyway, he's rambling again, but they're listening, and Izuku doesn't even realize he's leaning forward over the table, or how much more engaged he sounds. Different sigils work for different things, though I can't use most of them, I can use that one. Izuku taps the paper. He's simplifying, but he has to. It lets me connect? Let's go with connect. If I have a sigil and you have a sigil, I can connect to you and look closely at how your spirit is connected to you. They're like lines, magic lines, like a leash between you. Spirits are basically parasites, though a lot have learned to be beneficial over the years, but anyway, he gestures with his hands to try to describe something that he really does not have the right words for. Once I'm in there, I can look at how things are supposed to be connected and reconnect them. It was tricky the first time, but it's gotten easier now that I have practice. And he's rambling, Izuku realizes, despite his best efforts, and they absolutely must think he's insane now, but it's a bit too late to swallow his words, even if he wants to swallow his tongue. I was pretty sure I could channel into you if I carved my sigil into the bench and you sat on it long enough, so I was waiting a few streets away, but you never sat. He'd set up a circle to amplify everything and protect him, but without Eraserhead sitting down, it didn't matter. The room goes back to being silent. Has anyone told you that you talk too much? The cat spirit asks, yawning. You're not helping, says the kitsune. Who said anything about wanting to help? The cat retorts with something suspiciously like a snicker. This is the most entertainment I've had in months. Izuku has to ignore them and focus on the task at hand. Luckily, no one's noticed him being distracted. All right, Nighteye finally says. So you can repair quirks. How did you learn how to do this? At the same time, Eraserhead asks, Can you do it now? Izuku shrugs. I can if you want to watch. And I just learned when Sun Eaters came to me. I was figuring it out then. You told him you'd helped others, however. Crap, he had said that, and Sun Eater had told them. Some people's quirks give them trouble, so I've helped them, but not like this. And only when they've asked. It's usually when they can't turn things off. You can turn off quirks. Eraserhead's eyebrows are in his hairline, and that's the biggest reaction he's seen from the hero yet. Not exactly? And isn't that a terrible question he will not answer? I can teach them how to turn their own quirk off, though. Nighteye sighs and rubs at the bridge of his nose under his glasses. Why don't you show us how you can fix Eraserhead's quirk for now? Well, that is why I'm here, Izuku agrees. They probably want to stop this and go home and rest. It's late and he's been wasting their time. Can I have your hand? Eraserhead holds his hand out across the table. Everyone watches Izuku intently, like he's going to stab the hero with a ballpoint and make his daring escape past All Might's former sidekick, a police detective, a steel door, and an entire police station's night shift. Izuku tries not to feel hurt about that fact. He'd gone to them when he knew what that would mean. He draws the sigil on the back of Eraserhead's hand, glad that the pen is nice enough to handle skin without skipping. He adds the same to his own, and then folds his hands on the table, and closes his eyes and reaches out. Shota watches as Deku opens his eyes, and for a moment they seem to glow green. The time short enough Shota might wonder if he imagined it, but he's learned to trust those split-second observations. They've saved his life far too often. There, the kid says, and cracks a massive yawn. You never said it was broken. Eraserhead? Nighteye asks, and Shota activates his quirk even though he doesn't need to know it's back. He'd felt it, whatever the kid did. It hadn't felt like anything at all at first, and then the sense of emptiness, of loss, and almost cold void that seemed to exist along the whole of his spine suddenly disappeared, and he felt whole again. More than just whole, actually. Eraserhead. Shota stares at the kid, who hasn't so much as flinched at the removal of his quirk, and everyone reacts when their quirk is cancelled. He lets it end, blinking dry eyes that do not hurt. "What did you do?" And the kid, fuck, he's a kid, goes pale and leans back, all his excitable energy gone and hands suddenly up and defensive like he's expecting a blow. Your quirk was broken. I mean, it makes sense because I realized, I recognized you. You were at the USJ, you got hurt, and it affected your quirk, right? Since I was putting it back, I fixed it?" Shota's eyes narrow. At the USJ. Was this kid there? Do you want me to undo it?" He takes a steadying breath. Whoever this kid is, whatever he is, he's scared, or good at acting, and there's no decent way to treat him as anything but a scared kid for now. He relaxes, with effort, and shakes his head, looking to Sakauchi and Nighteye and nodding to them. "No, it's fine. You just surprised me." "How old are you, Deku?" And that's Sakauchi, focusing on the important details. The kid looks at the detective with a frown, like he knows he can't lie. 16. "What?" Shota realizes he said that out loud. "You don't look 16. The eyes Deku turns on him are baleful. "Wow, haven't heard that one before. You sure are an observant hero, Eraserhead." Shota figures he probably deserves that, but doesn't miss how the kid blushes and ducks his head in embarrassment right after. Like he only realized what he'd said after the fact. He's a conundrum. "All right, well, can you tell us your actual name?" Sakauchi continues after clearing his throat. "Your parents must be worried about you." "That I can't do." Deku's fists clench on the table. "I don't have a name. Not anymore. My mother, she's dead. No one knows where my father is." There's a pause as the kid takes a steadying breath, and he speaks into the tabletop. "I guess asking you to just let me go now that we're done is pointless." Sakauchi shakes his head, and Shota watches as the kid sags, but doesn't show any anger. "I'm sorry, Deku. We'll hold you here for tonight and make sure we don't have any other questions, and then we'll contact the services for minors. If you don't have any current legal guardians. It wouldn't be ethical to just let you go, young man. You must understand that." Deku breathes out and stares at Shota with a gaze too dark for comfort. "So, that was just another logical ruse?" "Ah," Shota thinks. He deserves that too. "It was necessary." Deku's expression doesn't change, and Shota feels like he's being judged, and harshly. But Deku's voice is steady as he speaks, the words cutting. "Is it easier to call it that instead of admitting you lie? I'm just asking for a friend." Shota doesn't get to reply. Nighteye stands up, motions sharp and agitated. "We're done here," he declares and marches out without even a farewell. Shota hasn't seen him this agitated in a long while. The case must be getting to him. They lead Deku to a holding cell. He asks for his backpack, which proves to hold a beat-up novel, a bottle of water, a granola bar, an emergency blanket that's clearly seen use, and a thin green woven blanket that's somehow even more well-worn. There's debate before giving him the items, but not the backpack itself. Whatever Deku thinks of that, he doesn't say, just rolls his eyes and settles onto the futon, with his blanket wrapped around his shoulders despite the heat. They find Nighteye pacing by Sakauchi's office, moving like a tiger with pent-up energy despite the late hour. Shota just wants to sleep. The kid missed his mark by suggesting Nighteye would ever be connected to a tortoise. Ha. What set you off? Beyond the obvious, Nighteye hesitates as Sakauchi opens his office door and invites them in to debrief. How much of that did he think was the truth? The detective sighs, shoulder slumping. Essentially, all of it. He believes every word. He moves to his chair behind his desk and sinks into it. Nighteye sits in the second chair. Eraserhead leans against the wall. Spirits, age, everything. His quirk is something else, Shota points out. If anyone finds out about it, they take advantage of him. You're suggesting they haven't already. Nighteye steeples his fingers as he leans on his knees. He was speaking to someone while talking to us. I recognize telepathy when it's in use, and he was communicating with someone. Couple that with his ability to seek you out and knowledge of your position in the trap, and his ability to find our interns and Fatgum's assistant, I think it's safe to assume someone is using him. Perhaps without his understanding of it. You think he's being conditioned? I think you've forgotten how All for One works. Night-Eye's voice is harsh. He can give quirks to anyone, including the quirkless, a young boy without parental figures. He already made Shigaraki, what if he was making another? This child appears right when we need someone to assist us with quirk-destroying bullets that were created by an enemy of the League of Villains. It's like his quirk was made for this, and this sort of long game is exactly what All for One does. The USJ. Shota feels sick. He said he recognized me. Exactly. Nighteye nods. He may have been involved even then. He might just be a very ill young boy. Tsukauchi interjects, the voice of reason. I don't think we should label him without evidence. They all consider that. Shota wants to believe the kid is, as he looks, young and unsure and afraid. But there's something to his eyes that suggests something darker. I used my quirk a few hours ago. Nighteye pushes himself up and sways slightly, but for Nighteye, it reads like he's standing in a gale. Shota moves to his side instantly. I'll check him tomorrow in the evening. If he's connected to the League or the Shie Hassaikai, that will tell us. In the meantime, Sasaki. Shota sets an arm on the man's shoulder to steady him. You're going home to sleep. You're one to talk, Aizawa. That's why I'm saying it. If I can tell you're sleep-deprived, you have a problem. Go home. We all need some sleep. The police can watch the kid for the night, and I'll sleep in the station just in case he does try something, all right? Shota heads off that argument before Nighteye can suggest it, and it works. Sasaki sags, which is impressive on a man of his build. It's a bit like watching some complex piece of origami collapse into itself. Go. The station is used to me crashing here. I've done it enough. Having an underground hero with an erasure quirk makes for a lot of backup calls when they can't use suppressants for some reason. Nighteye leaves, and Tsukauchi looks to Shota conflicted. He's a minor. We have rules. I do need to call social services. It's going to be difficult to trace him without a name, Shota points out, but there might be an alternative to that, if he makes a call. But when you do, we should see if he's been in the system. If he's had abusive foster parents or if they've sold him out, it might give us a lead there. And it wouldn't be the first time, especially if the kid started quirkless the way he said. For now, check the system for quirkless kids in care. I know that's a high percentage of them, but we might get lucky. Assuming that part was truth and not brainwashing, it might make him easier to find. We can hold him for 36 hours while we run things. Tsukauchi is already reaching into a drawer for paperwork. After that, we'll have to charge him to keep him here. Shota nods because he knows the rules all too well. Let's see what Nighteye finds tomorrow. Kid or not, it might be the difference between going back to a foster home and ending up in Tartarus. Now Masa grimaces, but doesn't argue the point. Go to sleep, he tells Shota. You know where the bunks are. I do. Shota leaves the man to it. Out of all of them, he knows Tsukauchi will actually go home to sleep when he's done. He gets 4 hours of sleep, which isn't the worst, but could be better when his phone rings. It's Kirishima, which causes instant worry that morphs into something like dread, as a student speaks. I think I recognize Deku-sensei. Shota leaves the room, with the 4 emergency bunks. Someone is asleep on the other set, and he doesn't want to wake them. Explain. When we went to rescue Bakugo, and we were going to the warehouse, and part of Shota still regrets forgiving his students for that dangerous exercise. Remember we told you someone gave us an address? It was him, at least. I'm pretty sure it was, looking at the photo Nighteye sent. And yes, Shota remembers. A kid in a hoodie approaching his students with information on Bakugo, an address on a scrap of paper, and then disappearing in front of them. They'd never traced him. The villains they'd captured didn't seem to have any intel on him either. The assumption had been some vigilante at the time. They need to know who this kid is, Shota realizes. For his sake, as well as for everyone involved with the current case, it can't wait. All right. He digs out his eye drops, but it's from habit. His eyes don't burn the way they have for the last few months. Good work. I'll take it from here. And what are you even doing up this early? Do I need to lecture you about proper sleeping habits? Weight training, is his student's far too cheerful reply. I'm always up this early. It's the best time to use the gym without getting distracted. Right then. And he can at least give credit where it's due. Kirishima hasn't ever neglected his physical education. They just need to get him to put that energy into his other studies. He hangs up, looks at the time, and decides to text Hizashi instead of call. An extra hour of sleep, for the man won't hurt at this point, and based on the circles under Deku's eyes, Shota can only hope the kid is asleep too. Izuku wakes up uninjured, though not particularly well rested. The blanket is a ward, specially made for times like this at the cost of a major favor, but one that is paid back in dividends in keeping him safe when he can't set up anything else. He folds it up neatly as he makes the borrowed bed. Not so much a bed as a shelf with a futon on it, probably better than a bed would have been, and takes stock. He feels worse now than he did yesterday, which isn't good. The clawing anxiety is getting stronger. Now he doesn't have heroes to distract him from it. It's also the change in location. The room they'd question him in had just been a room, not comfortable or comforting, but nothing special either. The holding cell is exactly that. The room has a third of it barred off, and that space split in two. The other cell is empty at least, but there's a guard working at a desk next to the door that feels all too familiar. Everything smells off, like they've tried to scrub the space clean, but fear and urine are in the walls and paint and floor. The overhead lighting comes from the same harsh buzzing bulbs. It's at least not cold. He remembers always being so cold. He knows in theory that he'll be okay, but it's hard to tell that to the clawing fear that he'll be trapped forever, that they'll put him back into a tiny room and leave him there and call him crazy and make everything so hard. He makes himself pick up his book. It's the story of Ibis, a book his mother gave him, and now so familiar that he nearly has it memorized. But that doesn't matter because reading it helps break the cycle, helps him think straight, helps him breathe. He runs his hands over the well-worn pages and grounds himself as best he can. The heroes and police are just doing their best with what they have. It isn't their fault they don't believe him. Even when he tells the truth, they call him a liar. They always do. He'll sit and be calm and make no fuss, and when they transfer him to services, he'll duck out then. If he leaves now, they'll just worry and try to find him, but they won't care once he's someone else's problem. That's how it's always been. They bring him breakfast in the morning, and this time a female officer who doesn't have a spirit at all asks for his name again. He apologizes when he can't tell her, wishes he could ask her about being a quirkless officer. If she likes her work, if everyone respects her, but it'd be rude to admit, he can tell, when she hasn't said anything to him, and it could hurt her. What if she lied about having a quirk? He knew plenty of people who did, who said their quirk did nothing useful, like having slightly altered taste or extra salty sweat. Sometimes that worked for people. Sometimes it backfired terribly. Izuku's seen the results of that from one too many of the people who live on the streets or in the Doya Guy now, enough that he hates the lie when he tells it himself. He's left to his own devices. The station is busy, the guard at the desk changes, but they don't really speak to him, and he doesn't want to bother them if they're busy. But he eventually asks if he could have some paper and a pen to write with. Frustratingly, they say they have to ask permission, and they're told no. He sits on his hands and doesn't pace the small space because pacing upsets people and there's nothing else to do but sit quietly. Thankfully, at least, he's not alone. You have everyone quite conflicted about you. Tamomo no Mei sits halfway through the bars, ignoring them. They think you might be working with the villains. You'd think being unable to lie in front of them would have helped with that, Izuku sighs. I guess I understand it from their perspective, but I wish they'd at least consider mine. If I was lying, wouldn't I have come up with something more believable? Instead, I'm back to being labeled as crazy. You're not crazy, the kitsune assures him. Well, he thinks she's trying to be assuring. It also sounds a little like she's making fun of him. Wonderful. In the world of everything that wants to kill me, at least one of you doesn't think I'm crazy. I'm so lucky. She laughs. I also don't want to kill you. 1 out of 1,000, 100,000, yippee. Izuku can't quite look at her. It's too uncomfortable under her stare, so he lies back on the futon. Why, though? I think you're the first to actually keep talking to me after I did whatever needed doing. And we never made a contract. You don't owe me anything. Maybe he should have insisted on one. Being able to harmlessly cancel a few quirks might be useful, especially right now. But at the time, he just wanted to be useful. He'd just wanted to do what he could because no one else could, and it was Eraserhead. Regrets weren't useful, but they at least made regular company. You are not what you are made to be, the kitsune says, and the statement is so unlike what everyone says to him. He rolls on his side to look at her. What? You are not what you are made to be. You are not what you are made out to be. Both things are untrue. You have surprised me, she says, like she's making all the sense in the world. I look forward to seeing what you become. What? He realizes he's speaking out loud, the guard looking at him funny, and he coughs and focuses. What do you mean by that? The whole monster defiler thing? He knows why they call him that, remembers all too well what the power it felt like, and I don't want to be like that. It was an accident, I promised that. He's interrupted by the door to the room opening and a teenager coming in. It's unexpected enough to catch his attention, and he doesn't miss how suddenly wary Tamomo no Mei is. Who is he? My human son, she explains as he hands the guard something and then comes to stand in front of the bars. The other boy has swept back hair and circles under his eyes that do actually remind Izuku of Eraserhead. He's in a school uniform and looks like it was a rough morning. Everything about him is slouched and just a bit messy. It reminds him of Kachan years ago now, refusing to wear his tie and always climbing on everything. Izuku shakes the thought away. Why had he suddenly thought of that? Probably because of Eraserhead the night before. When he'd gone in and fixed his quirk, he'd realized why he seemed familiar. He'd been the teacher who'd spoken up to the press after Kachan had been captured. He was Kachan's teacher, and he understood that Kachan wasn't a villain, would never be one. He was going to be such an amazing hero. The bars ring from someone knocking on them. Anyone home in there? Izuku flails, realizing he's zoned out, and gets to his feet to approach, and realize the newcomer's a full head taller than he is. If he's Eraserhead's kid, it makes sense, he supposes, that they'd let him in. He'd probably be a hero in training. Maybe Eraserhead thought he'd talk to someone his own age easier. Hi. Sorry, I was thinking. I could see that. The newcomer has his hands in his pockets, and an easy smile. One that almost looks trustworthy except for the way that Tamomo no Mei is watching them both. She hasn't said anything, but her tails are fanned out and twitching, and so far that's meant she's agitated. The newcomer's spirit is a small thing in comparison. A floating blue ball of fire with no distinct features that dives at Izuku's head just to make him flinch away. It laughs, with the sound of tinkling bells, while the other boy looks on confused. You okay? Izuku shoves his own hands into the front pocket of his hoodie so that he can clench them. Buzz off. Sorry, I thought I saw a wasp. Hi, I'm Deku. Shinso. The other boy introduces himself, but it's laid back. No bow or handshake, just a nod of the head. You're training to be a hero? Izuku asks, not sure what else he's supposed to say, and uncomfortable standing with the bars between them. Shinso looks past him, at the cell, and Izuku doesn't know what he might be looking for. He hasn't exactly been in here long enough to leave an impression on the place. They don't even have a clock anywhere to check the time, and he hasn't risked bringing his phone on this trip. Actually, do you know what time it is? That at least gets Shinso's attention. It's just after 9. How did you know I was training to be a hero? Izuku stares for a minute before he realizes the other boy is serious. Because you're wearing a UA uniform and at a police station at just after 9 a.m. talking to someone they think is working with villains? I don't think you'd be a general education student. It makes Shinso laugh, though Izuku gets the feeling it's despite himself, and the teen seems to relax from the sort of forced I'm easygoing pose he's had going to something a bit more natural. Yeah, I guess you're right. You're smart. I'll just cut the crap if you don't mind. I mean... Everything goes away. Izuku feels like he's wrapped very suddenly in a dozen blankets, except the blankets are slowly suffocating him. His chest feels tight, too tight, and the blankets cover his mouth and eyes, but he's cold. He's so cold, and he can't move, can't breathe, and he's screaming. Is he screaming? He feels his mouth move, but it doesn't sound like he's screaming at all. In fact, he feels very reasonable. Everything is very reasonable. Like, it's perfectly fine to be dying. It's important not to fight back, because if he fights back, it only ever gets worse, and... He blinks, as the pain crashes through everything, cutting the pressure away with a knife, but he still can't breathe. And the kitsune has his arm in her mouth, and when he yanks it out, he can feel the skin tear. What the hell? He stares at Shinso, who's looking at him in surprise, and the little blue flame spirit is laughing high and sharp and piercing, and fuck, he hasn't been able to redo the wards because they wouldn't give him a pen. That's how Tamomo no Mei bit him, which means anything else that wants to attack can, and Shinso is glaring at him like he's done something wrong. How did you do that? Izuku clutches his arm to his chest, panting. What happened? He demands, and there's power he's reaching for he never uses. He doesn't even realize he's using it because he feels trapped all over again. And the guard moved. When did the guard move? He didn't see her move one moment they'd been talking, and the next she's by the door, and the bars of the cell are warped. Oh God, how long was it? What did I do? What did he do to me? Tamomo no Mei leans in and puts her forehead right against Izuku's chest, presses it there hard enough for Izuku to rock with it, And somewhere away from her, Shinso is talking, and the guard is moving, and the lights are flickering, and his power is everywhere, but all Izuku cares about is the absolute certainty that comes from the kitsune's words. He asked you your name. He asked why you could not say it. I stopped you before you could explain. I'm sorry I did not warn you. It has been no time at all for humans. That is all. I swear it. I swear it. Izuku strokes her, grounding himself, and she allows it. And later, so much later, he will cry when he thinks about it, thinks about how kind it was that she let him touch her at all. But for now, he looks at Shinso and feels validated when the teen takes a step back. You have mind control, he states, mouthful of acid and regretting breakfast. You used mind control on a minor without his permission? And he's Eraserhead's son? And if he's here and he did this, Eraserhead did it. Eraserhead sent him, even after he'd come willingly and hadn't fought and had done everything they'd asked. Eraserhead had sent him. What was it they said about meeting your heroes? Fuck. Deku, you need to sit down and breathe. I think you're having a panic attack. Shinso backs up again. The guard is trying to open the door, but it seems to be jammed. You need to breathe. I can't. And he can't. He can't breathe, even with a weight against him that is comforting and certain, and maybe they'd had a good reason. Maybe there's an exception to the rule about quirk use. Maybe they meant no harm, but right now he can't think, can't care. I can't do this, he admits, voice cracking and shaking, and Shinso blinks at him in surprise as Deku, he's such a fucking useless Deku, feels the tears start, and he doesn't stop their fall because they'll just keep coming. He squeezes his bleeding arm to put pressure on the bite, and the pain is maybe grounding, but also doesn't actually help with how he feels right now. I can't do this. I was going to stay, I didn't want to worry anyone. Shinso holds out open, empty hands, consoling hands, his expression attempting something gentle, but Izuku doesn't believe it. He's seen that look before. What do you mean? Don't answer him. Tamomo no Mei warns. That is how his power flows. Furious, Izuku reaches with a bloody hand and Shinso flinches, but they're feet apart. He's behind bars, and he isn't reaching for the human at all. He grabs a little blue ball of fire, unthinking, and squeezes until it shrieks. Tamomo no Mei yelps and pulls away from him. Afraid or disgusted or shocked, he doesn't know. He doesn't care. He feels cold, ice cold. But he doesn't let go, even when his hand starts to blister because he can't even do this properly. I came because I wanted to help, he tells Shinso as the door to the room opens and Eraserhead enters. Hair wild and Quirk engaged, but it doesn't matter. Izuku doesn't have a quirk. I wanted to help you. You still can, Shinso says, voice uneven. Eraserhead seems to be caught between trying to break through the cell and worrying what Izuku might do if he's pushed. Good. Deku, Eraserhead seems to realize that his quirk isn't going to help, and so he stops trying. You don't have to go back to them. You can trust us. We'll look after you. Trust you? Izuku's fingers are smoking. He needs to let go. He throws the spirit as far as he can, and everyone flinches like he's throwing a bomb. Eraserhead surges to grab Shinso and ducks down, shielding him as the guard dives behind the desk. Izuku can't help it. He laughs. It isn't a good laugh, and he knows it, and he can't stop it, even though he tries. Everyone looks confused up at him because nothing has happened. They can't see anything. They don't know anything, and they never will. He can feel the spirit fleeing, trying to put as much distance between them, even though now Izuku will always know where it is. He makes his way back to the futon and manages to catch his breath as he collects his blanket and book with his other hand. By the time he turns back, the pro hero is standing at the cell doors, using his capture weapon to cut through the fused bars. Is this another logical ruse, Eraserhead? He asks, and his voice sounds high and weak to him, even though he's trying for cool and collected. You want me to trust you when you send your kid in to brainwash me? We needed to know your name, is the hero's tense reply as he stands in the cell, capture weapon loose in his hands and clearly ready to act. Just your name. We're trying to help you. You're not, Izuku thinks. Maybe says, but only the spirits can hear. It doesn't matter. He looks at Shinso, who's still staring at him. You're lucky I'm a better person than you or your dad, he tells him, still burning, still furious, still seeing darkness swim at the corners of his eyes. Breath still too short and sharp and high, and everything hurts. And he's so angry every word feels like it burns as he speaks it, like his mouth is dripping poison, and all he wants to do is reach out and... No. He won't be that thing, even when it's so easy, when it's almost easier to do it than it is to hold himself back. You want to be a hero, and he's not jealous, or maybe he is, as he stares past Eraserhead entirely to meet Shinso's gaze, unflinching, and he wonders what it's like to have such a great quirk and a hero like Eraserhead for a father. I hope you turn out to be a good one. I really do, but if you ever do that to me again, you won't get to. He can let it go, this time. He doesn't think he'll be able to, if it happens again. He's just not strong enough. Don't expect help again, he tells Eraserhead, because he's also not strong enough to do this again either. He's a weak, useless Deku. I won't come. Maybe Eraserhead knows he's moving. Maybe he can tell from his words Izuku doesn't know and doesn't care. The fabric of his capture weapon shoots forward to wrap around him, but Izuku opens his mouth and disappears. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 2 of Complicated Creation. Gosh, it's such a good fic. I love this chapter so much. I love the fact that the author brought Shinso into it as well. It was so well written. The whole interrogation, all the questioning, the stuff that it's going on mentally for Izuku as well. I really love how this one was done. I think it's incredible. I'm really excited for the next chapter too. So let me know your thoughts and reactions to everything so far. And as always, thank you so much for listening.